A school full of impoverished children, a cunning principal, and a parent-teacher association that felt more like a financial operation. What is the story really about? The salvation of a school or the corruption of a system? Hello, friends. You're listening to The School Principal, Part 14, written by Jalal Al-e Ahmad.
Apart from the woman who visited the school once a week, there were 2 or 3 other regular parents. One was the same guard who tied his son's legs with a belt and flogged him. He would occasionally come by, click his heels together, and no matter how much we insisted, he wouldn't lower his hand, let alone sit down. Another was a post and telegraph employee who came every 10 days. He was the father of that mischievous boy who skillfully pulled his hand out from under the principal's cane. He would sit for half an hour, and we would share our troubles or talk about politics, his 5th grade civil service salary, his 3 children, and his wife, who suffered from mental confusion for 1 month each year, and the 140 tamans monthly rent he paid. And there was a master carpenter whose son was in 1st grade. He was literate and proud of it, seemed efficient, and would shake my hand firmly with his large hands and slender wrists. He had developed a kind of devotion to me and kept pleading for me to assign him some task so he could prove his devotion in practice. I guessed that he must have had good memories of his own school days and mistakenly thought every Ali-Abad was a metropolis. There was also a well-digger, large-boned and tall, whose child was in 3rd grade. He came once a week, spent 10 to 15 minutes mingling with the janitors in the courtyard, and left quietly. He had no business, asked nothing of us, and said not a word. The first time he came to the school, for some reason he had climbed to the top of the school's high wall and was shouting loudly when I arrived. Those were the days when the school was being renovated through begged-for resources. From a distance, I thought he was an electricity department worker installing a pole. But when his shouts reached my ears, I hurried over. The children had poured out of the classrooms, and the principal, along with 2 teachers, was struggling to reach the top of the wall to grab his feet and pull him down. They probably thought no one should be allowed to climb over the walls of education so easily. I kept wondering how he had managed to climb such a high wall, but when I found out he was a well-digger, it made sense. The real surprise was how someone of his stature squeezed into the narrow tunnels of wells and qanats. A build like his was only good for climbing walls. The uproar was about why we hadn't registered his son's name with the charity for shoes and clothing, and similar complaints. When I reached him, I glanced at him, then scolded the principal and teachers to let him go. The children returned to their classrooms, and without looking at him, I said, satisfied, "Well done, master." And as I walked toward the office, I added, addressing the principal and teachers, "You probably didn't give this poor man a proper answer, so he climbed the wall. When someone has business with the school, they go to the office." Behind me, I heard a commotion, and as I entered the office, he and the principal came in together. Instead of the sturdy figure on the wall, here was a stooped man, his height bent in 3 places, knees, waist, and the back of his neck. It was clear he had never spoken to a school principal before in his life. I told him to sit. I felt he crumpled into the chair. Instead of speaking or answering, he suddenly burst into tears. Incredible. Loud, heaving sobs. I never thought such a figure could produce such a sound. I was at a loss. What should I do now? What had I even done to make him cry? Comfort him? How and why? So I left the room and called the new janitor to bring him water and, when he calmed down, bring him to me. But we never heard from him again. Not that day or any other day. His weekly visits continued, spending 10 to 15 minutes mingling with the janitors in the courtyard or porch before leaving. That day, a few minutes later, I saw through my office window him walking out of the school gate, tail between his legs. The new janitor came and said yes, they had asked his son for 5 tamans to register his name for shoes and clothing with the charity. Clearly, he had fallen for the principal's trick again. I dismissed the janitor and called for the principal. It turned out he had wanted to hit the principal, just like that, without warning. And the principal had called the teachers and children for help, and the guy, out of fear, had climbed the wall. Around late Bahman, on a snowy day, I met another parent. The janitors and principal came up the stairs one after another, breathless, and announced him. Clearly, they had caught wind of something. The guy was a very short man, westernized, made up, and pressed. He hadn't even sat down before talking about his education and his trips to Europe. With the trinkets tied to his wrists and fingers, you could open a jewelry shop. But his overcoat was shorter than my jacket. He wanted to transfer his son from another school there at that time of year. His son was one of those children whose breakfast milk and jam are forced down their throats, with a sallow complexion and lifeless eyes. He was in second grade and had failed 2 subjects in the first term, out of the 3.5 subjects second graders study. He said they had a gardener at their summer garden near the school whose son was our student and was studious. And it's clear that under the principal's shadow, the children progress well and are worth 7 snepars more than other schools, and such nonsense. And now, because of this child, they had moved to the summer garden in this snow and cold. I thought, the respectable locals have gotten bold. And then I made it clear that such compliments were unnecessary, and the school was proud to mostly deal with the children of gardeners and water distributors. I felt he was upset, so I stood up, called the principal, placed his hand and his son's hand in the principal's, and said goodbye. Half an hour later, the principal returned and said the guy had rented his city house to a high school for 3,200 tomans a month and sent his regards, meaning he wanted a private tutor and wouldn't have minded if the principal himself took on his son's education and such boastfulness. Some of this news was from our new janitor. I felt the principal was drooling. I told him he probably wanted reassurance that his son would be accepted and made it clear that it was better if he handled it himself, just to ensure the teachers didn't complain, and that by the end of the year, he wouldn't need to beg for a passing grade of 10. That very afternoon, the principal had gone and arranged for a 1-hour lesson every afternoon for 150 tomans a month. Now it was certain that the school would never close in the afternoons. The world was now to the principal's liking. He was earning extra income equal to his government salary, and from just one client. Every morning, his eyes sparkled so much that I think you could still see the reflection of all the luxuries and jewels in that guy's house in them. His mother's health had also improved, and she was discharged from the hospital. He was even thinking about getting married. He said his mother had started looking for a girl for him even before leaving the hospital, going door to door. It was as if his mind had started working. He came up with a new plan every day. For himself, for the school, and even for me. One day, he came and asked why we didn't have a parent-teacher association ourselves. He had sat down and calculated. He had seen that 50 or 60 parents could afford it, and from the one he was tutoring privately, he had obtained clear promises. I made it clear that he should be careful of the office gossip and his colleagues' jealousy and do whatever he wanted. I wrote the invitation letter for him with great flourish, plenty of flattery and titles. He took it to the education office, had it typed, and sent it to the fathers through the children. The meeting was formalized with the attendance of 20-some parents. He had invited 70. He was very frustrated about why our people were so negligent and thoughtless, and I made it clear that the invitation probably smelled of extortion. The good thing was that the guard on duty from the police station had also come. He stood at the door, clicking his heels together for everyone, raising his hand. The teachers sat side by side, speaking pompously, and the gathering had a certain dignity. The principal had provided tea and pastries, rented a gas lamp, and put the samovar behind him. The hall, for the first time in its life, saw some liveliness, noise, crowd, and comings and goings. There was a colonel, whom we made chairman, and that woman who visited the school once a week became vice chairman. And surely the colonel was delighted. There was also an old woman who, at the colonel's insistence, became treasurer, and the principal became the association's secretary. 1 or 2 others became alternate members and held other positions. When you're just a school principal and sit on the sidelines handing out titles, it's a whole world, and with such generosity. And everyone was happy and smiling. I completely kept myself out of it. The principalship alone was enough for my 7 backs. The one whose son the principal was tutoring privately hadn't come, but he had sent a sealed envelope addressed to the principal, which we opened right there. An apology for not being able to attain the benefit of our presence, and an insufficient amount inside the envelope. 150 tomans. First rate. I put the money on the treasurer's table for her to manage. The vice chairman, perfumed and made up, offered pastries, and the teachers blushed to their ears with each pastry they took. The janitors passed around tea hand to hand. In all that hustle and bustle, no one was thinking about the school principal, and I felt calculating and prudent, happy to be on the sidelines. While lost in these thoughts, I suddenly realized there were 300 or 400 tomans in cash on the table, and they had pledged 800 tomans. The old woman treasurer didn't have a purse with her, so the attendees themselves approved that the money should temporarily be with the principal, and there's no difference between us and you, levels of trust and confidence and such talk. The minutes were prepared, signatures lined up at the bottom, and finally mine at the very end. The meeting ended well and happily. And the next day I found out that the principal had sat on the bricks that night after the meeting and treated the teachers to a feast. The first thing I did was send a copy of that night's minutes to the Education Department, the General Personnel Office, the General Department of Social Affairs of the Ministry, and many other places, with the exact caution of a school principal. Then we called that same master carpenter and ordered him to build doors for the toilets in 2 days, which the principal paid for very reluctantly. Then we planted trees in both alleys of the school. We replaced the volleyball net, got multiple balls, and had practice every afternoon. Preparations for competitions with other schools, and amidst all this, the physical education inspector showed up. Daily check-ins, comings and goings, and it became indescribably busy. Until one morning, when I arrived at school, I heard noise coming from the hall. The sound of metal parts colliding and the grunting of children. Yes, it was the sound of a barbell. The principal had gone and, on his own initiative, spent 200 or 300 tomans to buy a barbell. The skinny children, with their brittle bones, were crushing their necks under its weight, faces flushed, sweating, and... What could I say? Should I get angry that he had done something without my permission? Was I even in charge? Or was it public funds? I had wanted it myself. That business with the shoes and clothing, and now this parent-teacher association. Did I even know what was given and taken? I only witnessed the money he gave to the carpenter. Really? My mind was at ease. They knew themselves. It was money the parents had given, and they probably knew how poorly the teachers lived. The important thing was that the school hall had gained vitality and was being used. The children at least had a ball to run after, and a heavy weight to sweat under, take deep breaths so their rib cages would grow, and better digest their bread and cheese or their dampok tuck. The principal was satisfied, and so were the teachers, because there was no jealousy or gossip. I just had to advise the principal to think of the janitors too.
The next part of this story will be uploaded tomorrow. What you will hear in the next episode. I decided to change the system, but I had forgotten one thing: the deep-seated fear etched into the heart of every student and every teacher. Looking for entertainment? On this channel, we share Iranian poems, stories, and podcasts in different languages for you. If you are interested in Iranian literature, culture, and tales, this is the best place for you.